The reason criticism in this title is in quotes is because Van Inwagen does provide a criticism of libertarianism, but ultimately Van Inwagen still accepts libertarianism among the various alternatives on the topic of free will. So let's see how it works. First of all, there is a discussion of metaphysical freedom. Now, a positive notion of freedom. This is a positive account, this metaphysical freedom. It's positive because it's the kind that we typically assume where we have an ability to do an action A and also the apto, which stands for the ability to do otherwise. We have options. The future is, in some respects, up to us and our decisions on which direction it goes. And so libertarians affirm this kind of freedom, this metaphysical freedom. In contrast, compatibilists typically conceive freedom merely in a negative way, freedom as freedom from constraint. Not a freedom to do something, but a freedom from constraint, from external forces. And that negative account, if you're free from constraint by external forces, is consistent with determinism. And so someone like W.T. Stace, for example, says that you can be free, understood in this negative way, and determinism still be true. The libertarian assumes metaphysical freedom, which is inconsistent with determinism. So let's take a closer look at this libertarian freedom and the concerns that might be raised with it. So Van Inwagen, on a big picture look at things, says every position in the free will debate that somebody might take must embrace a mystery of some kind. But he believes the libertarian position has a mystery that's more palatable than the other positions, right? We want to avoid mysteries. We want to be able to think things through carefully and come up with clear concepts. But Van Inwagen says this is a case where it's all, we're all stuck with a mystery in one way or another, and he favors the mystery that libertarianism has over the others. So libertarian freedom can be drawn out in the following way. So this includes forking paths.
So the libertarian view of free will is fairly intuitive. It's the idea that here we are in the present. In our past, whatever decisions we've made, whatever we've done, is a set solid line, and we cannot go back and change that. However, the future is full of alternatives. So we can go in one direction or another. And when we get to a future point in that line, we can make alternative decisions, and our life could go very different ways according to the various alternative decisions that we make. So that's the view of freedom when it's a libertarian view. Determinism would rule out all of those lines and alternatives.
If determinism is true, right, that view of freedom is impossible. Then there are no actual, these blue paths that we drew there. There are none of those. There's just a solid black line going into the future. And if one is morally responsible, then we need to have those genuine alternatives of that view, those potential blue lines that can branch off into the future that we're responsible for. If we're not capable of taking any other path, then we shouldn't be held responsible for the things that we do. So here's the challenge for libertarians. If the event leading to an action is undetermined, which the libertarian has to say that it is, right? It can't be determined. Then how is it? How does this work? How is it the person's choice? So it's a question, right? It's how can you explain this? So suppose, Van Inwagen asks, suppose the world were rewound, so to speak, so that somebody's on that path and it takes one of those blue options and then the world is rewound to the exact same state prior to that free choice. Now, if the person's genuinely free, it must be the case that if we let the world go again, so to speak, one of the other blue lines might be taken. Now, here's the challenge again in the form of a question. What explains the difference among those various possible outcomes? How can we explain why one person in one case took this direction when they could have taken the other direction? And if you rewound the world, they would have taken the other direction. So let's put this into a more careful argument, and we can call this the rewind argument. So we have to assume indeterminism in order to allow the metaphysical freedom that libertarians affirm. And that means that one is able to do one action A and also able to refrain from doing that action A. Now, if one could have done otherwise than one actually did, while in the exact same situation, then if the world were rewound, right, moved back in time to that point, sometimes the person would do A, and sometimes the person would refrain from doing A, would take a different path. Now, in both situations, doing A or refraining from doing A, the preceding events to that decision, the action, were exactly the same. And if the preceding events were exactly the same, then there's no way to explain the difference in the two types of cases, the difference between doing action A and not doing action A. And if there's no way to explain the difference among those two cases, then one of two things must be true. Either free will is impossible, as described by the libertarian, metaphysical freedom is impossible, or on the other hand, and at the least, free will is a mystery. Now, of course, Van Inwagen, being a libertarian, thinks that free will is a mystery. That's the conclusion that he would accept here from this dilemma or this disjunction. Of course, free will being impossible, you couldn't be a libertarian if you take that path. But maybe, right, maybe free will is impossible for the reasons provided in the argument. Maybe free will is incompatible with determinism, as the libertarian says, but it's also incompatible with indeterminism. That position, if one thinks that that is true, is one we call hard incompatibilism, the idea that freedom's impossible. It doesn't matter whether determinism is true or not true, freedom is impossible either way. So now we have a trilemma. So by definition, either determinism is true or indeterminism is true. If determinism is true, then we're not free. The libertarian might appeal to the consequence argument for concluding this, the idea that freedom is incompatible with determinism. So if determinism is true, then we're not free. On the other hand, because of the rewind argument, we might say if indeterminism is true, then we're not free. But, and here's why it's a trilemma, we believe that we are free. And elsewhere, I've provided an argument from deliberation that you can find that in the video on libertarianism and Lois Hope Walker. You can also find it in the video that is criticizing the views of W.T. Stace. So in any case, we believe that we are free when we're faced with a choice. We believe we could take one path or the other path. Thinking in the diagram terms, we think that it's up to us which blue line becomes actual. And so we believe we are free. So these things obviously cannot all be true. You can't all put them together. Van Inwagen and other libertarians will take the path of number 3 and say, well, something's mysterious. 2 is actually false, but we really can't explain how it is that somebody can be free with indeterminism. It's a mystery.